Hello, Avila Advantage Macroeconomics students. I want to introduce myself. I'm Joe Barnhill, going to be your instructor for the next 8 weeks. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you this late spring. I'm excited to teach this course right now. This is a great time to be taking an economics class, and we're going to spend a lot of time in discussion in this course, looking at current events and tying it back to microeconomics, whether it's from the individual decision, the firm's decision, or even how it ties into individuals and the entire macro economy. So for how I will do this is like usually every Friday afternoon, I will post a probably about a 10-minute or less video lecture to kind of give you some insights relative to the chapter material, the learning objectives, what we'll be going over during the week. First thing for this week is make sure do read the course guide. So if you look at that, you're going to see that in the course, we're going to have forum discussions. You're going to have 2 exams. You're going to have 2 writing assignments, and you're going to have weekly quizzes. So I do encourage you to kind of ask me questions, send emails if you do have any questions about that. But the main thing about this course, as long as you're staying on top of things, you're going to do well. You fall behind, that's where you're going to struggle a little bit, especially with the forum discussions. I have that where I ask you to post by Wednesday, so that gives people plenty enough time to critically think and respond to your initial post. The initial post need to be of quality post, and I have a rubric in the back of the course curriculum guide, or we kind of think about this I've got a smaller version printed here. Our principles of microeconomics. Make sure to review that because there's a rubric in the back that tells about the expectations for a good forum post and making sure you meet all those requirements. So, all right, anyway, with our first forum discussion this week, I picked an article for you to review actually about the coal mining region in Pennsylvania and how people are having to change their jobs. And this is what we're hearing a lot, like in Appalachian, even the politics now, and debate about whether trade agreements were good or bad for the United States. But maybe you were working in a coal mine, and now you were making we're making $80,000 to $100,000 a year, maybe making half that, trying to find others, retool your skills. And this is just not unique to this region. It's also happening in other places in the United States too. So there's a lot of individual decisions being made, both micro and macroeconomic decisions that resulted in this. As our movement towards more cleaner fuel, that's probably impacted the coal industry too. So there's always these variables happening in an economy. And I want you for this first week to kind of read that article. And after you read it, think about how the learning objectives in chapters 1 and 2 tie into what you read in the article. I felt it did a really great job, kind of like taking a snapshot of, for a student, wow, this is economics, this is real life. So I'm curious to get your thoughts, and also ask you to do a little bit of research to go out and find some additional information, other people that have retooled their school skill sets, or whether students, whether making decisions about to go to college and how expensive it is. So the return on investment, if you will, your education. All right. So, and I also asked you in that first forum discussion, just kind of introduce yourself just briefly so we get to know each other in the class too. With the learning objectives for this week, in chapter 1 and 2, if you've taken macro before, you probably had these 2 chapters before. The thing with this textbook, that I say it's free, but it's very brief too. So if you do have any questions, make sure to ask me questions. But the authors of this textbook, this OpenStax series, they kind of get right to the point. So you'll see this in the learning objectives. In the first chapter, they kind of discuss what is economics. We think of economics as how we organize all these resources, whether it's land, labor, capital, can be human capital too. And the choices that we make, as individuals in a microeconomics course, my philosophy, and this is kind of the way I think, is you have a choice to work, you have a choice to consume, and you have a choice for leisure. So the more you work, the more you can consume, but the more you work, the less time you have for leisure. And really, if you're making good microeconomic decisions, you want to try to improve your quality of life over a period of time. You don't want these big swings up and down. And hopefully you're making rational or good choices. And businesses have to make those same rational choices too, to try to interpret markets and do the things they feel is best to make themselves profitable and be around for the long run. Okay, so the second objective of this chapter was the micro versus macro. Macro is more the big picture. gross domestic product, inflation, unemployment, the Federal Reserve. We saw in December the Federal Reserve just raised interest rates, short-term rates for the first time, and there's talk that we will probably see at least 2 more times this year that interest rates are going to be going up very slowly because the Federal Reserve is waiting to see what happens. But the Fed and the fiscal side, the big side, they're trying to juggle those things of unemployment, inflation, and GDP, and keep the economy humming. So the micro side looks more at the individual choices and behaviors of firms and the choices that they make. And again, if those individuals and companies are making good choices, then that helps the overall macro economy. So they're both tied together. They also discuss about how economists use theories and models to try to explain situations or try to implement a model that they feel will best help the economy. With any economy, there's going to be scarcity. We have limited resources. We have to make choices. And we live with more and more people now. And we're realizing that these choices that we make have implications. And it can have implications on our standard of living, our quality of life, our health. So hopefully we implement policies, or as a whole, we do what is best for everyone. And there are some concerns, whether it's relative to income inequality, access to education, potential for job opportunities. I think that's why I really like this article about in any economy there's always change. You need to be able to adapt, but we have to figure out the best method or the best model. And economists like to put things in models to help explain that, well, if this happens in theory, this should happen too. So we'll look at some basic models in this beginning chapters with production possibility curve and a budget constraint model, but we'll also eventually evolve into the different four-market structure models for perfect competition, oligopoly, monopoly, monopolistic competition. So, okay, some other things we'll talk about in chapter 2. You're going to go over a basic model of a budget constraint. And as I mentioned, we have choices to work, and from that work we have some amount of income. But it's a very simplified model to kind of ties into other theories that if I have choices between maybe purchasing 2 goods and I have $10, and if one good costs 50 cents, well, if I put, let's say it was on hamburgers or something, I could buy up to 20 hamburgers if they're 50 cents each with $10. But if the other good is, let's just say a pop, and that costs $1. Well, if I have $10 divided by, how many times can $1 go into 10? That would be 10 pops that I can consume. So, and the idea that I consume some choice along this line, or I could not use all that $10. I might only buy 1 hamburger, 1 Coke, and I haven't spent all my money. But it's saying that we have restrictions along this line. We can't go outside of that within a budget constraint. So even within our own lives, we have to make choices about how we spend our money. And if some people do borrow money, that can increase current consumption, but it would also decrease future potential consumption too. Okay. The other thing they look at is the production possibility frontier. So it's a very simplified model that demonstrates the law of increasing opportunity cost. Kind of says that because of specialization of labor, if you have all these workers over here that are making butter and workers over here that are making guns, if I start to shove some of those gun workers into the butter factory, well, they don't know a lot about producing butter, so I might require more and more of them each time just to produce an additional stick of butter. And this is what we call the law of increasing opportunity cost. So it says that there's trade-offs, but within this production possibility curve, if we're a point inside the curve, we're inefficient. There's something going on, such as high unemployment, or it could be destruction of resources or war going on. If we're on the curve, we're at an efficient point. And in a closed economy, we cannot be outside of that curve. It's only if we were to engage in trade, and I was listening to NPR earlier this week, and they were talking about how some of you might hear about the politics going on, about how bad some of the trade agreements for the United States, and how some people were hurt. Most economists are in favor of open free trade. We would not have the amount of goods and services we do in the United States without open and free trade. However, it doesn't mean that not everyone is hurt. There are definitely people like in the, say, Appalachian area that had jobs making furniture that was now made in China. those people obviously were hurt. So it's kind of the question whether the net of society benefits versus certain specific parties as a whole. So just know this, that in a closed economy, we can't get outside that production possibility curve. In the given point in time period, things can improve in the future, such as having more resources, more technology, and that curve can continue to shift out. But in the current time period, the only way we get outside that curve is engaging in trade with other nations in which we have a comparative advantage. So if we're really good at producing wheat, Japan's really good at producing small motors. In theory, we would trade the two goods between it. We don't do it directly that way, but we do it through pricing, and who can do it at the lower opportunity cost. Okay, last thing to wrap up for the week in section, the last learning objection, like learning objective, not objection, objective, is that in economics we look at things, what is the best policy? What is the best approach? What is the right thing to do to try to stimulate our economy, put the right regulation in place, and make sure we can continue to grow, provide opportunities for employment, increase income so people have a better standard of living. So in positive economics, those are things that we can look at in theory or things that we can measure. I can measure the unemployment rate and see how many people are unemployed. I could look at theory that if you raise price, you should expect the supply and demand to go down for whatever firm you are and whatever you're producing. But when we look at normative economics, these are value judgments. These are opinions. It's like what we should do. So just as managers in firms will probably argue over what is the best approach to the market, and also politicians, you will hear them pontificate about their ideas about what the best thing is for the economy. Some aren't always the best ideas, but it might be more to get election votes or just to be heard. But we have to separate those two. And in economics, a lot of times we do give value judgments, what is most important to us. But hopefully we're making those value judgments on sound, positive, or economic theory. So, well, that is it for this week. But again, what I'll do is I'll post these out every Friday, so we're kind of ready to go on Sunday. But our course the weeks always start on Monday. But again, do jump in early, the forum discussions, stay active. I'll be in there looking at forum discussions every day, replying back to you all. So I look forward to working with you all. You have a great week, and we'll talk to you online. Take care.